We're going to pick up where we left off on paragraph 31. In the realm of science, metaphysical distrust in reality takes the form of distrust in our conventions, intuitions, religious beliefs, and sensibilities about the nature of reality. Reality is a pure outside, only accessed by cold, indifferent, impersonal inquiry. That is a perfect distillation of the post Cartesian situation. Descartes' radical self doubt, or radical doubt, has translated into, as he says, distrust in conventions, intuitions, religious beliefs, and sensibilities about the nature of reality. What Descartes holds is that to know something is to be able to measure it. So a Cartesian would, if you spoke to a pure Cartesian about, oh well, it's cold outside, you would say that's a meaningless statement. How many degrees is it outside? It's this extreme pursuit of facts over phenomenological experience, right? And this sort of and it's related to hyper individualization in this way, in that, take for instance religious beliefs and sensibilities. These are social things. These are things that you share with other people, right? Whereas hard, clear, and distinct factual knowledge is an individual thing. You went out there and you measured it, and it's however long, right? You went out there and you timed it, and it cycles every so often, right? It's an individual thing. Now, it's still an objective thing in a sense, but once you've individualized man to that extent, then that becomes a platform for hypersubjectivity as well, right? Because you no longer have a basis for this sort of interpersonal kind of social understanding of things. Like, it's not really knowledge in the hard, factual Cartesian sense. It's a shared understanding of the way things are, right? So then if someone says, oh, well, I feel like I'm a woman, even though he's biologically a man, okay, you can say, well, that's not factual. I mean, that's clearly not the case. But that platform of hyper-individualization then says, well, you can't rely on these accepted conventions to describe this person when he's reporting a different subjective experience, right? Moving on. In the realm of politics, metaphysical distrust in reality takes the form of distrust in traditional sovereign authority, regarding it as unjust, arbitrary, and tyrannical. Sovereigns must be legitimated by some explicit, abstract constitutional or democratic procedure. Okay? Yeah. The key word there is arbitrary. So if you've invalidated this shared understanding, this sort of these sort of emergent properties, I guess you could say, of a society living together, then any sort of sovereign authority is going to be arbitrary, because the legitimacy of a sovereign authority is based on this sort of social understanding. You get rid of that, now everything has to be extremely explicit and based on the individual, right? And one of the problems with that is that when that's the case, that system becomes Byzantine and ultimately easy to manipulate if you have a lot of time and money, and really just money, because you have money, you can buy other people's time. So if you have money, you can hire an army of lawyers and CPAs to manipulate the legal system for you. And so it becomes a mockery of justice in the end, right? Okay. Wokeness is just the applying it to the realm of culture, where the unwritten norms of civilization secretly disguise relationships of injustice, oppression, and marginalization by virtue of not being premised by expressly consensual, rational, etc. consciousness. Right? Again, like that hyper Cartesianism sets a foundation for hyper individualization. That foundation for hyper individualization then is a kind of soil from which wokeness can prosper, right? Because in any sort of sane social setting, these sort of woke extremes, they can't go anywhere because it's just obvious to everyone how ridiculous that they are. But if you set it as a baseline, this hyper individualism, now you have a system where you can invalidate these social norms and then anything goes, right? And when you can make an issue out of every little thing like that, it becomes a huge distraction from actual problems, such as the ones he relates here: injustice, oppression, marginalization. Right? So now this is how you have this weird situation where you have the academic and corporate environment favoring these sort of out there individuals who are leading these strange and antisocial lives, right? At the expense of, someone who can't get a job because he doesn't check any what's the word I'm looking for? Any affirmative action book, any affirmative action check marks, right? But supposedly he's privileged, right? Because he's straight and white and male. And so this is how like it hides this sort of injustice and oppression through this sort of wokeness that grows out of this hyper individualized uh, foundation. In bourgeois modernity, only what is in the sphere of explicit responsibility of conscious subjects can be trusted. Any recognition of humanity in reality itself is no different than a superstition. Reality is arbitrary, meaningless, and malign. Only institutions are good. Yeah, that's a really key point. That's a really key point. There's no sense of this of us all being in it together because you invalidate that as soon as you invalidate these social norms. Us all being in it together. So, for instance, like in these academic and corporate cultures, they'll preach all day long about how we are all in it together and we all need to do our part. And we all need to be selfless. This, that, and the other. But then ultimately, the basis for that in real life are these shared social norms. Are this that those shared social norms, those that shared understanding of things? That's the basis for people being willing to go outside of their individual interests on behalf of the group. Without that, the latter is impossible. It's just, why would someone do that? Why would someone do something for someone else when you share nothing with that person, right? And so then that reinforces this idea of reality being arbitrary and meaningless because, if you're defying these social norms or what have you, and then all of a sudden you're not getting this sort of social support that you feel like you're entitled to, well, then you have to force people to help you. So then that creates the institution to force people to do what societies normally would have done spontaneously if they'd been integrated into a coherent society, right? And this seed of this understanding of reality as being arbitrary, meaningless, and malign. Oh, forgot to do the review this time. Oh well, but anyway, that goes back to this sort of Cartesianism slash uh, Gnosticism slash Baal worship. That's related to that. It's this whole idea of overthrowing God, the physical, material reality being evil. That's where that comes from, but then that's reinforced by this invalidation of the shared experience. The madness of bourgeois capitalism, which alienates mankind from its material being, is the true culprit behind the woke phenomena, not Marxism. All the Fox did was make Marxism compatible with bourgeois institutions. The original problem is the bourgeoisie itself. Yeah. The Gnostic, occultist, and alchemical origins of the bourgeois Enlightenment are abundantly clear. Lindsay accuses of Marxism what is the foundation of liberalism. Marxism is the exact opposite of this bourgeois conceit of knowledge, gnosis, formalism, and wokeness. Yeah. There's an interesting phrase there. He says, conceit of knowledge. It's a good phrase because factual knowledge and understanding are two very different things. I can give you an example. There's this. Well, no, I can't say that. I can't talk about people I know at work. That could get me in trouble. I'll just say a factual understanding of something. There's a factual understanding of something, and then there's an understanding of how things are done, right? Just as an example. You can get factual understanding from reading books, but until you actually apply it, you don't really know what it actually means, right? There's always something that's lost in translation. There's always some plurality of things associated with an object of meaning that the participants aren't even conscious of and can't communicate. And until you're actually elbows deep in it, you're not going to understand it either. Because you have to integrate this sort of unconscious sense about it and understanding of it with then the conscious participation in it. It's both. It's not one or the other. Right? And when you really are knowledgeable about a subject, you tend to understand that there's always more that you don't know. And so, paradoxically, the most knowledgeable person usually has the least amount of conceit. And he may have a wealth of factual knowledge, but he doesn't really rely so much on his factual knowledge as much as he relies on the general understanding. There's a relationship there. There's a relationship to the material reality of that object of being. Right? That's enough for today. Ended it on paragraph 36. We will pick it back up at paragraph 37.